what would you say is like one, belief that you had about business that you've like completely abandoned now that you are where you are?
Completely abandoned. I can do it all myself.
Yes.
And I should. One of the things I talk a lot about is if you're going to be a business, I think anybody, it's okay to be selfish.
Yes.
Like think about yourself, because my job as a leader is to pour into my team, my clients, my investors, like everybody else. Like that's my job. Even as a parent and as a spouse, like it's to pour into other people and be of service. If I'm going to do that well and not burn out, I've got to make sure I'm filling my own cup.
Definitely.
And I can't do it alone. And I need to think about what I need as a person. I think it's really important to focus on your mental and physical health, whatever that means for you. Number two, I think it's really important to find a peer group, a group of people doing what you do or similar positions that you can be comfortable talking to and hearing about and learning from. And then number three is find a paid coach, somebody that you pay for unfiltered advice. A mentor is helpful, but a paid coach is better. And I think those three things, and not like you can't do it alone. So think through what you need is your foundation to pour into yourself so that you can continue to pour into others.
Matt, it is so good to see you. I'm happy that we are recording this podcast and getting to learn all about you and your business and your career path. So welcome.
Nikki, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to talking today.
Awesome. Well, I just want to jump right in. I saw, I think I mentioned to you before we started recording that, because we had some scheduling issues that popped up, I've been following you for a little bit longer on LinkedIn than I normally do for a guest. So I've got to really see your personality shine through. And some of your posts have certainly like made me laugh. And I love reading comment sections when posters ruffle feathers. So you posted something about wearing a hat to a meeting that you were considering buying a company and you got some shit for it. So I would love to talk about that because I noticed in some of the comments there was some really strong opinions about attire.
Oh, yeah. I think, the funny thing for me is I actually started my career out as an attorney. So like my first job, I was wearing a suit and a tie all the time and I hated it. And I'll be honest with you right now, I am wearing a button-down flannel with sweatpants. And I am very comfortable with the, what somebody told me the other day, it's the remote work mullet, where it's business on top and comfort on the bottom.
100%. I mean, the fact that I am also in sweatpants is glorious to me.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. But, for me, so I'm on this call and per the story, part of what we do as a business, we do accounting and bookkeeping. So totally boring stuff. But part of my job and what we do is we also buy companies. And it means I got to talk to a lot of people. And in the accounting space, they're a lot like lawyers, where they some of the more aged people in the industry just are used to dressing up for work. And I showed up and I had a hoodie on and a hat. I pretty much wear a hat and a hoodie all the time because I work at home and I'm at a point in my career where I think I'm good enough to wear what I want to. And if you don't like it, then I've got some choice words that I'm more than happy to share with you. But in this case, I'm on a phone call with this guy and he reached out to me about possibly buying his firm. And we pop in and he just kind of looks at me. He's like, a hat and a hoodie. Like, don't you think that looks unprofessional? And, a younger, less evolved me would have literally just told him to F off. And I definitely thought about it, but I actually looked at him and I was like, you know what? Like what I found in growing a remote company, and we're 5 years old as business, have about 100 people. And so like we've learned a lot about like culture and like truly building a good business. And I looked at him and I was like, you know what? We talk a lot about doing the right thing. And we work a lot on transparency and we're a team. And, we try to create an environment where it doesn't matter who you are and what you look like. If you do the job and if you're a good person, Decimal is a great place to work. And honestly, like we're 2 minutes in and I'm not sure it's going to be a good fit for you.
Right.
And he just kind of looks at me and I'm like, yeah, like we just met and that's the first thing you want to tell me. Like, I don't think you are going to be a great fit at Decimal. And I didn't tell him that we have a no assholes policy, and that was totally a jackass thing to do. And but yeah, so that was, and I thought it would be a funny post, and as you could see, it took off a little bit.
It definitely did. It is so interesting because especially when you're working for someone, right? You've got a manager, you've got your deliverables, you've got things that you're required to do. I remember years ago, it was the dead of summer. I was working for Intel. My campus was the Folsom location. So in the summer in Folsom, in the Sacramento area, it gets over 100 degrees. It is very hot. So that day I was wearing a very modest sundress. It probably hit my knees. I had a sweater with me because it was, of course, freezing in the office because that's, just how it is in the summer. It's always like an ice tomb in there. And I was leaving for the day. So I got to the stairwell. I took my sweater off because I was walking down 2 flights of stairs and walking out the front door. I hear this woman behind me go, "You going to Hawaii?" And interestingly enough, I had just got back from Hawaii. So I turned around and I go, "No, but I'd love to be." And she's like, "My manager would never let me wear that." And I was like stunned. I was like, I was like, "Well, I have a sweater in my bag." I was like, "But regardless," I go, "It's 100 degrees outside and I'm leaving." And she's like, "Oh." But then the funniest part about it to me was this woman did not have an ounce of makeup on. She was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and wrinkled jeans. And she's like scoffing at me when I had makeup on. My hair looked nice. I was wearing a nice dress, nice sandals, and I was leaving for the day. I was like, "You don't write my reviews. I don't care who you are. Why are you talking to me?" It's
also just like, when did it become, and I don't think it ever has been, okay to judge people based on their appearance? And to me, and by the way, I will also say on the flip side of that, I have had a few instances, even as a remote boss, where I have had to tell people they needed to do something more with their attire. Yeah. Like ripped cutoff sleeves on a sales call. Just, it's not like the most professional appearance. And so there are guardrails.
Absolutely.
But within what I consider mine to be very wide guardrails, I want you to express yourself. We have a woman on this team. She is an amazing accounting manager. And she wears the coolest t-shirts. And I keep wanting to hop on a Zoom call with her because she's wearing cool t-shirts and they say fun things. And I think that's a great self-expression. Who cares what you're wearing? And the fact that people want to be judgmental is just so wrong. And it never was right, but it also feels so outdated to me.
Yeah. And I think that, it says so much more about them than about you. If somebody's going to lead off with something negative and try to tear you down, it's like, okay, why are you so unhappy? I'm just living my life. Why do you feel the need to even say something negative to me? You don't even know me.
Yeah, I agree. And, I was talking to somebody the other day. The pandemic was a tough time. It was crazy, particularly the first few months. Being a boss, I think there are a lot of us that are going to have traumas that we're unwinding for a long time on what it was like to be an employer during the pandemic. Yeah. But one of the good things that came out of it was it's now okay for life to be messy and for your colleagues to see that.
Yes.
My kids are home. At some point during this podcast, somebody is going to scream too loud and you're going to have to edit it out. But pre-pandemic, people would judge you for that. And now it's just that's part of life. Cat walks across the screen, stuff happens. It's just fine. That I think is a really good change from the pandemic of just it's now, there's no wall between work and life. We've brought it all together, and that's just cool because we're all a mess.
I literally have said those exact words before. I remember working from home before, and it was if the doorbell rang, you're like, "Oh my God, where's the mute button?" My God, the dog bark, oh no. And now it's just there's pets, there's kids, there's people, and you can still just continue on.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really good changes. And, but kind of like the whole point of the story, some people haven't changed yet.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. So let's talk more about Decimal because from what little I know, I think it is a brilliant solution. And I also really have liked what you've said about the way you run your business. So as a serial entrepreneur, how did you end up here?
I'm a recovering attorney running an accounting company. So that's not a real straight line path. The biggest thing is this is my third company. Okay. And at the previous two, I always joke that when you're running a company, the three worst things are HR, IT, and accounting. Like if you have to deal with a problem in any of those areas, you're angry, you feel like you're moving backwards. Like those just don't feel good, but you have to get them right. Yeah. Like you absolutely do. And in my past companies, whether it was hiring people to do the accounting work or at another company trying to hire the best accounting firms, it was all a mess. And it was a really terrible solution. And you fundamentally have to pay your bills, get paid, and track it all to survive as a business. Yeah. And so we ultimately started Decimal to do that. And for me, it's really easy because whether it's my content online or our podcast or what we do at Decimal, my personal mission is just to help make it easier to be a business. Decimal does that by helping with the really boring accounting and tax stuff. And what's been cool is, thanks to the pandemic, we've been able to do it as a remote company. And, we're 5 years in now and we're getting close to 100 employees, helped about 1,000 businesses. Like we've grown a lot. Like we've had a lot of success, and it's really because of the team. It's because of the culture that we've built, and running a company that's fully remote is hard. Yeah. I talk to our team a lot about how we're all an island, and it's our job as employers, as leaders, to build bridges, to create situations that get people working together and feeling like a team. And, part of that stitching for me is your company values. Most companies, Intel might be one of them. Those values are words on a wall. Like they're not things that everybody knows and lives by and thinks about. And at Decimal, they are. Best story that I had was this last summer, we had an intern named JJ. In fact, he just emailed me and he's going to do some project work. But I did an exit interview with him. And I just wanted to see, like, hey, as an intern, like, how was the experience? Like, what was it like? Like, we never had a real good intern before. And he looked and he goes, I'm the only kid he's going back to Butler University. And he goes, I'm the only person going back to business school that could tell you all the values of the company that they worked for. Wow. And he goes, you repeat them all the time. Your team repeats them. They talk about them with clients. Like I know all of Decimal's core values, and that feels like weird and cool to me.
That is such a great testimonial.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you talk about something that me as a boss gives you goosebumps and like, you're like, okay, we are doing something right. Yeah. That felt really cool.
Especially in a remote environment. I mean, I've got to ask you, so what has been the biggest challenge with growing a team that is remote, and largely, what did you start a few months before the pandemic?
Oh yeah. I mean, things were great. We started the company in January. It was going awesome. And then a month and a half later, the pandemic hit and we thought, oh my gosh, who knows what's going to happen?
Right.
A lot of it's hard. And I make a lot of mistakes. And I think that's part of being in my role is I'm going to screw up a ton. And that's okay. Part of one of those core values for us is we move fast and make things better. Well, an underlying behavior part of that is we're trying new things. And if we're trying new things, a lot isn't going to succeed. Okay. And we talk a lot about my failures because doing that normalizes everybody else's failures.
Totally, right?
But, we go back to that island analogy. That's the hardest thing about running a remote business is you don't get the, hey, let's go to lunch. And you don't get the conversations about life. You also don't get the like, oh my gosh, you haven't done your hair in 3 days. Are you okay? Like, it looks like something might be going on. So we have to be a lot more intentional. Yeah. And we have to create work together. We have to create situations where people feel connected on a daily basis, whether that's via Zoom or asynchronously via Slack. We have to do a lot and work a lot harder as managers and as team members. And that's why one of the fun things about my job is as we've grown, I've taken it on to do trainings for every level of leadership at Decimal. Okay. So I have monthly meetings with all of our team leads, with all of the managers, with all of the directors. Awesome. And I really specifically work with them on coaching them through situations and problems. And, we work together as a team to try to create that, which also makes them into a team. And
absolutely.
So we try to do a lot intentionally to create those values. And when we see behaviors, when people do great things, one of the cool habits that we've built at Decimal and behaviors is we ask people to connect that to a value.
Oh,
like you
great.
did something awesome for a client. What value did that highlight? And so it kind of creates this redundancy of we have our own shared language at Decimal, which is kind of a cool like gratitude and like we're trying to help people and all of that stuff.
Oh, that's so awesome. I mean, gratitude is kind of like the foundation of how I exist out into the world. So anytime somebody brings up gratitude, awesome. I'm like, yes, my people. One of the things that I've seen you talk a bit about is empowering employees. And that is also one of my absolute favorite things to do, because when I was at my prior role in the corporate world at SkySlope, I ran a startup within that company. And so, I often say that I was in charge of everything from hiring to firing. We had our own P&L, all of that kind of stuff. So it was a fantastic, fantastic journey for me there. But I often would teach my team like, hey, if there is a problem, like I want to know how you would solve it. I want you to come to me. I want you to be solution oriented. I want you to come to me and say like, here's the issue. Here are the ways that I think we could solve it. Maybe it's going to be something that is totally off the wall and isn't going to work, but I at least want you to feel like I respect your ideas, and I would rather have you figure out how the solution than come to me being like, what should I do?
No, I think that's a really good point. And one of the things that's hard as a leader is at some point, particularly if your company is growing, you have to look at yourself and say, I'm good at these things and I'm really bad at these things.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
And that's a weird dichotomy too, because particularly if you're an entrepreneur and you're running a company, you also have a confidence. Like I'm highly confident that we can do this. I'm highly confident that I'm the person for the job.
Yeah.
But also combining that with the humility to be able to do a self-assessment, to understand your own flaws and weaknesses is, I think, a tough thing for a lot of particularly first-time entrepreneurs and leaders. But when you nail it, that's when you start to look and say, okay, I have these deficiencies. That's cool. Yeah, let me hire people that fill them. I'm like, that's cool, because guess what? I'm not going to be perfect. I screw up a ton. So like, might as well just accept it and move on.
Totally.
And hiring people that have the abilities that you don't is the first level of empowering. It's saying, hey, I have this thing that I can't do. I'm hiring you to do it.
Yes. And I'm trusting you to do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the two things, empowerment and trust, go side by side. And ultimately too, what I've found is you also have to trust that they're going to fail.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And one of the hardest things is when you do ask people, hey, how would you solve it? Sometimes you have to let them go solve it the way that you would not.
Yeah.
Which is like, I've got 3 kids. They're 10, 10, and 8. And some of what I have to do is, and by the way, the similarities sometimes between parenting and bossing is a little crazy. And I bet. Not going to admit how many times I tactically use the exact same talk track, but you look at your kids, you look at your employees, and you just have to let them do it.
Yeah.
Even if you know it's not right, because watching them solve the failure is as important as their first thought on creating a solution. And that's also where you start to understand the difference between people's ceiling and like where they can go is how quickly they adapt on failure and how resilient they are when they do fail.
Well, I think in providing an environment where people get comfortable with failure and knowing that, they're not going to be like looked down upon, or they're not going to get fired, or they're not going to, not get another promotion or whatever it may be, because nobody is perfect. And I think that's like so important for people to understand, is that like you could be really, really good at your job and you're still going to have things that you screw up.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think too, so one of the things that we've done, it was cool. I just had a conversation with a woman that's worked for us for now 30 days. And I asked her, I'm like, what are your impressions? And she goes, one of the coolest things that I've seen at Decimal is people work together. Like you all edit each other's emails. And we talk about emails in a thread. We use Front for our shared inbox. And she goes, I've never been at a place where people were comfortable with that. And like, it's peer to peer, it's boss to peer. She was like, I just saw an accounting manager edit an email that you were going to send. Like, you're cool with that? I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, you all know this client better than I do. Like, that's fantastic. Like, do it. And she's like, that type of collaboration also helps people you start to see who's comfortable collaborating. And that also helps to test ceiling. It tests like what people are capable of is not just like how they solve problems and how they think about it, but how willing they are to share the burden and work with others. And then on the flip side, give credit where it's due.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a really great place to work. It sounds like you fostered an incredible environment despite all of the challenges of starting your business essentially through COVID and then dealing with, a remote workforce. Where are you guys spread out across?
Oh, we're in 27 states and 5 countries.
Nice.
So we're all over. And, one of the cool things is my job, and JJ, the intern, kind of highlighted this, is chief repeating officer.
Okay.
But I'm lucky enough that I've had a great team. I've got a great co-founder, Jacob Cloran. I have a COO who is now like really good at running the business, which I'm not. I always joke I'm good at getting people to jump off a bridge. I just can't get them to line up to do it. Okay. And Michael, our COO, is really good at lining them up. But as we've developed layers, as we've developed managers and directors, like they all have taken on the same mantra of like, hey, we're in this to make it easier to be a business. We're in this to help these companies. Now we've got to make sure that we're doing the right things at the right times and all the other nuances of operating a profitable, successful business. But they've taken that cultural part and understood and grown the fact that we at Decimal are trying to create a team of people that do great work and are growing really well. And that's the core of our success, is that people.
Yeah. So how did you end up here though? Like, what was it that you decided, hey, there is a gap here and I have the solution to fill it?
So after my last company, so my company before this, told you this is my third company. Well, the second one was a restaurant marketing tech business. And it was one of those like really good idea, really terrible company. So it failed spectacularly, raised some venture money. And
I love when people come on and tell me that they failed spectacularly because it's just so bold and like rambunctious to say it that way. And the learnings that come from it, it's like, they're always like, man, we really screwed that up, but look at all we learned. And now I'm here.
Totally bombed. And it was an amazing experience. But after that, my wife is amazing. Like, she is, at the time, she was running the gaming commission for the state of Indiana. Now she's a big time gaming attorney. Okay. Way cooler than me. Like, you want to talk to people.
So gaming, does that mean like casinos?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I didn't know you guys had casinos there too.
Oh, yeah. We apparently have a ton.
Interesting.
But she looked at me and she was thinking about getting out of running the commission. And she looked and she goes, I want you to get, I don't care what we do, like financially we're fine, but will you do me a favor and get benefits for 2 years? And so I joined a large accounting firm in Indianapolis where we live as an entrepreneur in residence. They had been a client at 2 of my former companies, and they said, hey, we want to start a bunch of companies. We think we have a bunch of stuff here that we could do in addition to the accounting work. And it was really cool on them. Somerset CPAs, now CBiz, I think, was that company. And so I joined there, and I didn't make it the full 2 years that I promised her. She told me that was okay. But one of the things we started was what Decimal is today. We saw inside how they were handling the bookkeeping and kind of client accounting services. And we just said, you know what, we can do this better. And so we started Decimal and then used the pandemic to buy it out from them. And we've grown since then.
Okay, cool. That's so neat. I always am curious, like how people got started and how they went down their path and decided like, hey, like this does pencil out. Like we have the financial model in place. We can say like, hey, this is worth giving it a go. And that's exciting to see how you've grown. So, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one of the things that was really cool for us, and I think is a great like entrepreneurial tip for people that want to run a business.
Yeah.
Restaurant marketing tech is super sexy and cool. Like I know people at all the restaurants in town, in a bunch of cities. Like it is a fun environment. Terrible place to run a tech company. Like really bad idea.
Oh gosh.
But so ultimately I always knew I was going to start another company. And I said, I just want to do something really boring that people have to do. And I'm not sure there's anything more boring than accounting and tax.
Well, yes, that is very true because, it's funny. I just saw something the other day where it talked about how we don't learn anything about how to do our taxes in high school. And it's like the biggest fail of that like education system in general, because then it comes time for tax season and you're like, I don't even know what to do. I don't. Then, you have those programs that it's like, oh, you can do it yourself. And it's like, no, you can't. No, you literally can't.
God, no.
Like I would never trust myself to do that myself. And I am a very efficient person. I can handle a lot. I can do a lot of things, but taxes are not one of them. But one of the reasons that I was so excited to interview you is because you've created a very cool business that you are a total entrepreneur in the world of accounting. So I'm very excited to, highlight what you guys are doing and have this conversation.
Well, I appreciate that. And I love your mantra and the whole triple entendre.
Thank you.
I mean, to me, I'm running a company with people in 5 countries and 27 states.
Right? That's so cool.
To be fair, you asked me 5-10 years ago, I wouldn't have conceptualized that as possible.
Yeah,
for me.
Totally.
But it's a really cool thing. And it's super fun to see people in different states and countries and share the stuff that they're celebrating and eating. Like food is a nice common language. And, I love to eat. So it's great.
Yeah.
But I think it's fun. And, one of the things for me, I was just talking to somebody because as we look at our next iteration as a company at Decimal, we're going to expand our purview next year into helping accounting firms themselves and helping bookkeepers do their work better.
Awesome.
Because the irony is there are 85,000 accounting firms in the United States. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Nobody actually thinks it. It's actually a really entrepreneurial industry. It's just really hard to actually do it profitably. You don't have your success stories of people that have done it and run a really good one. I'm lucky as in this space because I was never capable of doing the work. In any service company, that's always the trap is if you can do the work, it means that you're splitting your time between doing the work and building the company.
Oh, okay.
I never had that. I am conceptually, it's impossible for me. If I help you on your books, we're both in big trouble. So I got to focus on one thing, which was company building.
Yeah.
And that made it so that we could really look at, hey, how do we build a business that has 2 to 3x the margins of your traditional firm? How do we build a sales process that sells 10x more than everybody else sells?
Yes.
How do we create a client experience that takes the best of tech companies, the best of accounting firms, the best of everywhere, and create a once in a lifetime experience for people doing something they absolutely hate doing?
Yeah.
And we've been able to do that successfully. And part of it is because we come at this from a totally different angle of not being accountants.
I love that. That is so cool. And that's such a great thing to think about, right? You're like, I'm not necessarily a subject matter expert in what we are in our target market, but I know how to run the business to offer a service that will make you guys much more successful.
Well, I think coming at it from a different angle. So you ask somebody who's an accountant who's going to help you with your bookkeeping. They view it as an accounting problem. Me, I view it as a business problem.
Yeah.
You have a business issue that you need to accomplish and you actually don't care about the accounting. Fundamentally, accounting is meaningless to you. You just want to pay your bills, pay your people, get paid, and track it all whenever you want to track it. That's fundamentally all you actually care about. And when you break it down and come at it from that angle, you don't care about accounting.
Yeah.
And so that it helps kind of flip everything on its head. And that's what I think accountants and service providers, lawyers, same thing. They struggle to talk to people in the language that they're used to speaking.
Right.
And they assume that you're going to talk to them in their language. And I'm not capable of that. So it's pervaded decimal that we're better at talking about this stuff than other people.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm laughing as you're saying this because I'm like flashing back to conversations that I had at SkySlope with our controller when I would just be like, I want to do this, or I want to do this bonus structure, or I want to do this. And he'd be like, no. And I'm like, what do you mean no? Like, what do you mean no? Why no? Like, how about yes?
It is.
Like,
we always joke that the office of the CFO we call it the CF no. Like that's what everybody like thinks about when you think of a controller and a CFO. And like the reality is that role should be more enabling. It should be how can we figure this out? And maybe the answer is no, but if you can unpack why, then you can maybe figure out what you're really asking and you can accomplish it in a different way. Yeah. And so it should be a more creative position rather than a no.
Yeah. Nobody likes to hear no, especially people that are in sales, right? If you're trying to build something, nobody wants to hear no.
Oh yeah, 100%. I love salespeople.
Yeah, definitely. So you said that this is your third company, and your second one was the restaurant marketing, which that is such also a wide jump from being a lawyer. So what was company number one? And is that in a completely different arena as well? Or are you just bouncing all over the place? Yeah.
Oh, 100%. So to give you the full story, I worked at a big law firm coming out of law school, was a real lawyer, still technically am a member of the bar, mainly because they make you continue to pay for it. And then I went over and I worked for a nonprofit tech company and helped them build a new sales process. They'd never done inside sales. Neither had I, but we built it into what they're now doing still today. And from there, I got offered the opportunity to run a company, actually a set of companies for somebody else in legal tech, kind of combining my two careers of tech company and lawyer. And that was my first chance to run companies. And it was a great experience. It was, did really well. And from there, I just wanted to go start my own thing. And the first good idea that came was not a great company. And that led me to, the rest of the story we just talked about.
Okay. So did you come from a long line of entrepreneurs? Is this something that's in your blood, or are you kind of one of a kind in your family?
No, I'm one of a kind in my wife's family. But they're all the lawyers. But
got it. Okay.
I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So it was funny. This last Labor Day, we had a large family reunion. We had 60 people under one roof. Wow.
And like sleeping and everything?
Oh, yeah. We rented out like what ended up being kind of like a minor hotel.
I was going to say, it sounds like camp.
Oh, it was. And like a lot of them were little kids. And like my kids it was amazing, amazing time. But what was crazy is I looked around and out of those 60 people, 12 of them either had run a large organization or were currently running a large organization. And so that is, 20% of the people in this building were entrepreneurs. Yeah. And that's kind of what I grew up in. My dad owned a business. My grandpa owned a business. The reason I went to law school was, number one, everybody always talked, and they're right. Like law school really helps you learn how to think and analyze problems and like stuff like that. And my ADD brain really needed that. Okay. But my dad told me, he goes, you know what? Go to law school. You're going to run your own company someday. It'll save you a hell of a lot on legal fees. And
do you feel like that's a true statement?
I do. Look, my wife would tell you the reason it was a really good idea I went to law school is because I met her there.
Smart lady.
But in general, I do think it's been a very beneficial thing for me.
It is interesting because I feel like the older I get, like the more that I can understand how to do things and the more I can understand different topics, knowing that I'm certainly not an expert in anything, but it does help when you're having to make decisions or whether, problem solving, all of that. I know nothing about legal stuff aside from, being a lifelong watcher of Law and Order. So,
oh yeah. Well, here's the secret. Neither do most lawyers.
Yeah.
But it's been a really good thing for me. And kind of like you mentioned, like as we spend more time in our careers, as we have more experiences, it opens our ability to think things through from different angles. And what being a lawyer in law school taught me was much earlier in my career, I was able to do that. And so what I've been able to expand upon is broader than I think what most other people have been able to expand upon.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really helpful. So going back to your current company, you said it's 27 states and five countries. That is a ton of time zones. Are you guys ever able to have like an all hands?
No, not as an all hands. Yeah, we'll do like US all hands and then like more, like we've got a lot of people in the Philippines.
Okay.
So it's like a 12 and 12. And so we'll do all hands, and some of our team members working in Europe, we'll ask them to work more kind of US shifts or something like that.
Yeah.
So we do try to create ways for people to work together, and some of our Philippines teams will work a mid shift. So there's some crossover. We try to do as much as we can to make it feel like one company. But as far as getting everybody on the exact same thing at the exact same time, I think we took a Christmas picture earlier today and we had 45 people.
Wow, that's great.
So yeah,
that's definitely a lot of time zones. I mean, when I was in Europe a couple months ago, I was mostly working US hours. So, but it was actually, I didn't mind it because aside from like, not being able to have dinner out on every weeknight with friends or watch the sunset outside, I still was like, oh, I have most of my day to like get a lot of stuff done and respond to email and, work out or do all the things. And then, around 2:00 is when people would start like, hitting my calendar with different stuff. So
that's what my co-founder, Jacob, during the pandemic, he did the kind of 1 month here, 1 month there, 2 months in Portugal. Nice. And even last winter, I think he skied the Alps for a month. Like he's found that to be the same thing as you said, where it's like, hey, I can spend my whole day doing stuff, doing what I want. Yeah. And then I work, kind of a normal day from 2:00 on. And then he'll usually have a late dinner because he's, in his 20s. So unlike me, where 5:00 feels like a good time to eat, he's totally cool eating at 10.
But I'm laughing because like literally yesterday, it was like 4:30. Mom, I think it's time for dinner.
Oh, hey, when you have kids too, you get used to like, all right, 4:30, like, hey, those geriatric hours in Florida, food's cheap. Let's go.
Right. Totally. So what would you say that now that you have all of this experience under your belt, after all of these different iterations of yourself, these different businesses that you've worked in, what would you say is like one, belief that you had about business that you've like completely abandoned now that you are where you are?
Completely abandoned. I can do it all myself. Yes. And I should, one of the things I talk a lot about is if you're going to be a business, I think anybody, it's okay to be selfish.
Yes.
Like think about yourself, because my job as a leader is to pour into my team, my clients, my investors, like everybody else. Like that's my job, even as a parent and as a spouse, like it's to pour into other people and be of service. If I'm going to do that well and not burn out, I've got to make sure I'm filling my own cup.
Definitely.
And I can't do it alone. And I need to think about what I need as a person. And so I talk a lot to people about like, hey, stuff I didn't do at my first 2 companies. I think it's really important to focus on your mental and physical health, whatever that means for you. Number 2, I think it's really important to find a peer group, a group of people doing what you do or similar positions that you can be comfortable talking to and hearing about and learning from. And then number 3 is find a paid coach, somebody that you pay for unfiltered advice. A mentor is helpful, but a paid coach is better because if you find the right one, they'll help point out those flaws that maybe you're not as good at seeing. And I've got an amazing coach in the way that he's helped me, and some of the things he's pointed out in me, I didn't know. And I think those 3 things, and not like you can't do it alone. So think through what you need as your foundation to pour into yourself so that you can continue to pour into others.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir as far as like the whole being selfish. I know I've probably said like 10 times now in different conversations on this podcast about how like I do not believe selfish is a bad word. I think it's a good word, because if I'm not taking care of me, nobody else is going to be taking care of me. And unless I'm taking care of me, I can't give in all the ways that I need to give in order to bring the success to the people that I'm working with.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, everything in its own place, and you can't overdo it in anything, but you have to think about, like, you've got to be mentally and physically healthy, or you're not going to be there for your team. And first time founders, and I mentor a lot and I talk to a ton. Like, I see it all the time. Like, they think, I've got to work harder. I've got to work more. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And I'm like, no, dude, you got to like slow down.
Yeah.
Like, take a break. I was just talking to a woman the other day that she's been a client of ours at multiple companies. She's an amazing, amazing woman. And she just kind of looked at her board and said, I need a break. I want to be done. And I told her, I was like, that's totally fine. Like, go do you. You're going to do this again. You're going to be awesome at it again. Take your time, take a break. My wife told me to take 2 years and get benefits. Like, it was really helpful for me.
No, it's so interesting because, and I'm so glad that we're at this place in life right now where like having a career break is no longer frowned upon, right? Like, remember when we were younger and it would be like, oh, I don't want to show that I had a gap in my resume where I didn't have a job for 2 months because then they're going to wonder what's wrong with me. And now people are doing that. And I'm like, good for you. Like, take the break, take the time. When I left my corporate role last October, September 29th was my very last day. And I had a trip planned that had been planned for months. So I was like, cool, I'm going to go on this trip. I'm going to, relax. I'm going to have fun. And then I'll get back and I'll kind of like start, revamping my resume and seeing what else is out there. I got back and I was shocked at how much rest I actually needed and how stressed I didn't even realize that I was, and how I had days where I just woke up and I was like, I'm going to just sit around today and watch Netflix and hang out with my dog. And the fact that I was able to give myself that gift of time, I am so grateful for, because it allowed me to move into 2024 with like a whole new outlook, a whole new plan of attack. And this time last year, if you would have told me that like this is where my life would be this time this year, I would have been like, not a chance. Like, that's crazy. So yeah, taking the time off was the first domino of the chain of events that's got me to here.
Well, I think that's awesome. And I think that's brave too.
Thanks.
We spend our whole lives and our whole careers with people telling us what we should do and what we should be and what we should wear. And, I think it's really important. I think the pandemic's helped kind of reset this in a lot of people too, where it's like, do you? What is good for you? What do you want? And I think if more people actually took the time to really think through, like, what makes me happy? What do I want to do? I think they'd find a lot better outcomes in their life and their career. And I think I've tried to do that in a company at Decimal, and trying to create that flexibility, that space, that everything for what people need.
Yeah.
But I think more and more people should really consider that question of like, what do I want? What do I need?
I could not agree with you more. All right. Last thing I want to discuss before we wrap this up. So what is something business-wise that you hope we have left behind in 2024? Like something that just grinds your gears, or something that you're like, man, I would love it if we never had to deal with that again.
Man, I watch the Fed interest rates like I used to watch NCAA scores. I would love to not have to do that. And part of it's less for my business than like, hey, we've helped 1,000 companies, and we've seen the impact of all of these things on those businesses and how hard things are on them. And you're not talking about it a ton. That to me is like, I feel like since the pandemic, small business owners, people that run companies, haven't truly been able to take a deep breath. I would love it if we could reach this kind of economic period of like, I'd love to take a deep breath at some point. And I know our clients would too. And, I could go into how to run your business. I could go into like how to think about your business. I could go into anything, but like, honest to God, I would love to not care about the Fed minutes for like ever.
Well, Well, I hope that you can get to that point. And it's funny you brought up small businesses. I saw a tweet or something where it was talking about, how Small Business Saturday falls like after Black Friday, and that small businesses have just been struggling so much, like you said, since the pandemic. They really have not got a lot of relief. And now you see these Black Friday sales starting like as early as October. And time. So people are spending. And then it gets to Small Business Saturday and people are kind of like, okay, like my budget's tapped out. So I think that supporting those small businesses is so important because small businesses are really like the fabric of America,
Oh, they are. They absolutely are. And they're great people trying to do good things. And, but I think we'll get there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I've really loved this conversation. And to everybody listening and watching, thank you for being here. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, rate, review. All of those little things do mean so much. So I really appreciate every comment and every like, subscribe, and share. And we will see you next week. Matt, thank you so much for being here. Bye.
Thanks, Nikki. Have a good one.